1,000 words. On my birthday, my father gave me a vintage locket. My husband Julian called it ugly trash. When that necklace disappeared, my phone rang. It was my father. "Stop looking," he ordered. "Grab your daughter and leave through the back door right now. Your brother is waiting in the alley." Before I continue, let me know where you are watching from below. Hit like and subscribe if you ever had to run from the person you loved most. Trust me, you will want to hear what I found in that getaway car. My name is Nia, and I am 32 years old. I run my public relations agency in Atlanta, a business I built from the ground up with my 2 hands. For 7 years, I thought I had a solid marriage to Julian, a medical billing director who constantly reminded me he came from a prominent elite family. Julian loved projecting an image of old money even though I paid the lion's share of the mortgage on our house. He was obsessed with status. When my father Elias, a retired federal cybersecurity director, handed me a tarnished brass locket, Julian could barely hide his disgust. He told me he would buy a real diamond soon to cover up my working-class roots. I brushed it off as just another one of Julian's elitist microaggressions. But this morning, the locket was gone. I left it on my dresser the night before. I was tearing my bedroom apart, lifting pillows, checking under the bed frame, and emptying every drawer when my phone vibrated against the nightstand. The caller ID showed my dad. I answered, expecting a casual morning chat. His voice was ice cold. "Nia, stop looking for the necklace." My heart skipped a terrifying beat. How did he know I was looking for it? I had not told a soul it was missing. Before I could ask, he gave a terrifying command. "Do exactly as I say. Do not pack a single bag. Do not grab your purse or keys. Go straight to Laylas' room, wake her up, and walk out the back door immediately. Your brother Trey is idling in the alley behind your house. You have 2 minutes before they get there." A cold sweat broke out on my neck. My father was not a dramatic man. In 30 years working in federal cyber defense, he was always the calmest person in any room. If he told me to drop everything and run, it meant my life was in immediate danger. I dropped my phone onto the bed and sprinted down the hallway to my 6-year-old daughter's room. Layla was fast asleep, tangled in her pink blankets, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding around us. I scooped her small body up into my arms, pressing her face into my shoulder so she would not wake up and cry out. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the doorknob of the back patio door. The morning air was biting and crisp, and I had no shoes on, just my socks hitting the freezing cold wooden deck. I rushed down the back steps and bolted toward the wooden fence gate at the edge of our backyard. Just as my trembling hand pushed the gate open, I heard the unmistakable sound of a key sliding into the front door lock. It was Julian, but he was definitely not alone. The heavy booming voice that echoed through our foyer made my blood run cold. It was Preston. Preston was Julian's brother-in-law, a wealthy, powerful white hospital administrator who truly believed his status and money made him completely invincible. Preston despised me with every fiber of his being. He hated my humble background, hated my fierce independence, and usually avoided stepping foot in our neighborhood like it was somehow contaminated. He had never once visited our home in the entire 7 years Julian and I had been married. Yet here he was, storming into my house on a random Tuesday morning, sounding like a man possessed. "Where is it?" Preston roared, his deep voice echoing down the hallway directly toward the master bedroom. "Find that piece of trash right now, Julian, before it ruins everything we have built." I heard glass smashing and furniture breaking inside my own home. They were ruthlessly tearing the place apart, looking for the very locket Julian had mocked just weeks ago. I squeezed Layla tighter against my chest, pushed forcefully through the gate, and sprinted down the paved alleyway without looking back. Sure enough, a black SUV was idling there, with the headlights completely off. The heavy back door flew open instantly. My older brother Trey, an ex-military combat veteran, was sitting in the driver's seat, his sharp eyes scanning the perimeter like we were in a hostile war zone. "Get in right now," Trey commanded, keeping his voice dangerously low and urgent. I threw myself into the back seat with Layla pulling the heavy door shut securely behind me. Trey hit the gas hard, and the heavy vehicle surged forward, pinning me deeply against the leather seats. As we sped quickly away from the only safe home I had ever known, I looked out the tinted rear window. I could clearly see the dark silhouette of Julian standing aggressively on our back deck, holding a heavy baseball bat and frantically scanning the yard. The man I had shared a bed with, loved and trusted, was hunting me down. I held my innocent daughter tight, trying to steady my erratic breathing as Trey expertly navigated through the hidden back streets of Atlanta. My mind was suddenly racing with terrifying and completely unanswerable questions. Why did Preston want that old locket so incredibly desperately? How did my father know it was missing before I even realized it myself? And why was my own husband willing to violently strike his own wife and our innocent child without hesitation or mercy? I did not stop to wonder why Preston was suddenly tearing through my home. I pushed through the wooden gate and sprinted blindly down the dark alleyway. My brother Trey was already idling in his black SUV with the headlights off. "Get in right now," Trey commanded, opening the door. I threw myself into the back seat, pulling Layla against my chest and slamming the door shut. Trey ripped the steering wheel hard to the left, sending our vehicle onto the main avenue. My heart hammered against my ribs as I twisted around to look out the rear window. Julian and Preston had sprinted out of the back gate. Preston was red in the face, his expensive suit jacket flapping as he pointed a finger toward our vehicle. Julian looked like a different person. The director I married was replaced by a desperate man. He hurled his weapon at the pavement. He shouted something I could not hear, but the rage twisting his features told me enough. Trey slammed his foot on the gas, weaving through the traffic. He checked his mirrors with military precision. "Keep your head down, Nia," he commanded, his eyes locked on the road. "They are going to get to their cars and try to follow us." I pressed my daughter against the seat as she stirred in her sleep. "Mama, where are we going?" she mumbled. "We are just taking a surprise drive, sweetie," I whispered. "Go back to sleep." She closed her eyes again, trusting me while my world shattered. We took 3 sharp turns flying down side streets until the neighborhood was far behind us. Trey drove like a ghost, navigating industrial zones and back roads, taking paths I never knew existed. I leaned back against the headrest, trying to catch my breath, but the air felt thick. Why were they so desperate to find that vintage necklace? My father had given it to me a week ago. He said it was a family heirloom, something to keep close. Julian had laughed at it, calling it a piece of garbage. But now my elitist husband and his arrogant brother-in-law were willing to tear my house apart and hunt me down to get it back. I urgently needed to figure out my next move. If I was running, I needed money. My boutique agency was finally pulling in accounts. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I tapped the blue icon for my banking app. The screen loaded, showing the familiar dashboard. I stared at the numbers, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. The operating account, which held exactly $450,000 yesterday, now displayed a terrifying balance of 0. I blinked hard, rubbing my eyes, thinking there must be a glitch in the server. I refreshed the screen. 0. Panic surged through my chest like a physical blow. I clicked on the transaction history, my breath catching in my throat. The entire sum had been wired out at 3 in the morning. I clicked on the transfer details to see the destination. The authorization signature belonged to Julian, but the routing information was what made my blood run cold. The money had not just been transferred to a personal account. It was routed through a complex clearinghouse network directly tied to Preston and his hospital administration empire. They had drained my life, stripped away my business, and funneled my money into their machine. A sick feeling settled deep in my stomach. I quickly navigated to the personal accounts page, tapping the tab for Laylas' college fund. I had started that fund the day she was born, depositing a portion of every single client retainer I earned. I watched the loading icons spin, feeling a wave of nausea wash over me. The screen refreshed. 0. Every single dollar of my daughter's future was gone. Julian had wiped it all clean. The man who kissed Layla goodnight, the man who promised to protect our family, had stolen her college fund in the dead of night. Trey glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his jaw clenched tight. "What is it, Nia?" he asked, his voice cutting through the heavy silence of the car. "What did you find?" I could barely force the words past the massive lump in my throat. "He took everything, Trey. Julian emptied my business accounts. He took Laylas' college fund. $450,000 just vanished into thin air. He routed it through Preston's hospital network so I could not freeze the transfer. They planned this whole thing out. They stripped me of every dime I own. Trey gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. My brother had always hated Julian, seeing right through his fake, charming facade from day one. "Do not worry about money right now," Trey said firmly, shifting gears as we merged onto the interstate highway. "Dad has a secure location set up for us. We just need to get there without being tracked. Nobody is going to hurt you or Layla while I am breathing." I looked down at my phone, the glowing screen displaying the absolute zero balance. I had woken up as a successful independent business owner and a dedicated wife. Now I was a fugitive running for my life with my sleeping child in my arms. I stared out the window, watching the tall buildings of the city blur past us. The reality of my situation crushed my chest heavily. Every single moment of our marriage had been a carefully orchestrated lie designed to ultimately destroy me. My husband was not just an elitist snob. He was a ruthless criminal, willing to destroy his own family for whatever secrets were hiding inside that ugly vintage locket. The betrayal burned through my veins, replacing my terror with a slow rising fury. I turned my phone off, holding it tightly in my hand, as Trey drove us toward the unknown. As the streetlights blurred past my window, my mind dragged me back to the nightmare of the previous evening. It was supposed to be a simple birthday dinner at an upscale steakhouse in Buckhead to celebrate. Instead, it was a masterclass in humiliation, orchestrated by my husband's wealthy family. Julian had insisted on inviting Preston and his sister, despite knowing they despised my presence. They arrived late, wearing their arrogance like designer coats. Preston spent the entire evening making thinly veiled comments about my boutique agency. He swirled his scotch and asked how my urban project was holding up. He deliberately used words like urban and grassroots to remind everyone at the table that I did not belong to their exclusive society. He bragged loudly about his hospital administration empire, dominating the conversation with his usual white savior complex while looking at me like I was a stain on the restaurant upholstery. Julian did nothing to defend me. He sat there desperate for Preston's approval, laughing at every condescending joke and eagerly nodding at every classist insult. Julian always craved the validation of his elite in-laws, treating them like royalty, while dismissing the woman who actually paid his credit card bills. I sat quietly, gripping my napkin, swallowing my anger. Then my father, Elias, arrived. He was the only genuine person in the room, walking in with his quiet dignity and handing me a small wrapped box. Inside was the vintage brass locket. It was heavy and different from the flashy jewelry my in-laws flaunted. I smiled and clasped it around my neck, immediately feeling a sense of grounded comfort. Julian leaned over and smirked, his eyes dripping with undisguised contempt. "Do not worry, babe," he whispered loudly enough for Preston to hear. "I will buy you a real diamond next week to hide that working-class aesthetic." Preston chuckled and added that it was charming how my people held on to cheap trinkets. My father did not react. He just looked at Julian with a gaze so piercing it made the table fall silent for a brief second. I had no idea that beneath my father's calm exterior, he was handing me the very tool that would tear their entire fraudulent empire to the ground. I went to bed completely unaware that the ugly locket was the centerpiece of a deadly game. Trey took a sharp right turn, pulling me out of my toxic memories and back into the terrifying present. The sleek city high-rises had vanished, replaced by an abandoned industrial district. The roads here were cracked and heavily potholed, offering no streetlights to guide the way. We navigated through a maze of rusted shipping containers and dilapidated factory buildings until Trey slowed the SUV to a crawl. He steered us toward a massive, unmarked corrugated metal warehouse tucked away at the very end of a dead-end gravel road. It looked completely abandoned from the outside, with boarded-up windows and graffiti covering the brick walls. But as Trey flashed his headlights twice quickly, a heavy reinforced steel door slowly began to roll upward. We drove straight into the pitch-black interior, and the metal door immediately slammed shut behind us, plunging us into total darkness. A second later, fluorescent lights flickered to life above us. The transformation was jarring. The inside of this abandoned warehouse was a highly sophisticated tactical command center. The air was freezing cold, filled with the humming sounds of heavy-duty cooling fans and massive power generators. I unbuckled my sleeping daughter and stepped out of the vehicle, my eyes adjusting to the bright glare. Standing at the center of the vast concrete floor was my father. Elias was not wearing his usual casual retirement clothes. He was dressed in dark tactical gear, looking every bit the federal cybersecurity director he used to be before he supposedly retired. He stood behind a massive horseshoe-shaped desk, surrounded by towering black server racks and a dozen glowing computer monitors. The screens were displaying scrolling code network maps and live security camera feeds from multiple angles across the city. The sheer scale of the setup was breathtaking. Elias stepped around the desk, his face etched with a grim, serious expression. He did not offer a comforting hug or a warm greeting. There was no time for reassurance. He walked straight toward me, his sharp eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made me shiver. "Are you hurt, Nia?" he asked, his voice cutting through the hum of the server racks. I shook my head, gripping Layla tightly against my shoulder. "I am fine," I replied, trembling. We got out just before they broke into the bedroom. But Julian drained my accounts, Dad. He took everything, every single dollar of my business money, and Layla's college fund is gone. My father did not look surprised. He just nodded slowly, his jaw clenched tight. "I know," he said, turning back toward the glowing walls of monitors. "I tracked the wire transfers the second they bypassed the firewall. They are moving fast, trying to liquidate your assets before we can lock them out completely." I stepped closer to the desks, staring at the data streaming across the screens. "Why is this happening?" I demanded, the anger returning to my voice. "Why were Julian and Preston tearing my house apart looking for that vintage necklace you gave me? What is going on?" Elias typed a quick command into his keyboard, and one of the large center monitors went black. A second later, an image of the brass locket appeared on the screen, rotating slowly in three-dimensional space. "That necklace was never a piece of jewelry," Nia, my father, said, his voice dropping to a serious, calculated tone. "You have been sleeping next to a monster, and Preston is the one holding his leash. We do not have much time before they track my secondary servers, so you need to listen to me very carefully." I stared at the rotating three-dimensional image of the locket on the massive monitor, trying to make sense of my father's words. Elias turned back to the keyboard, his fingers moving across the keys with practiced speed. "For months, I have been tracking anomalies in Julian's financial behavior." My father began, his voice low and steady. "When you first introduced him to me, I noticed the way he deflected questions about his administrative billing. He was too smooth, too polished, and far too eager to integrate his lifestyle with Preston's hospital network. A man on a director's salary does not suddenly buy a luxury vehicle or gain access to country clubs without an alternative revenue stream. I suspected him, Nia, but I needed proof that would stand up in a federal court. I could not just hack his devices without triggering his security protocols. That is why I built the locket." Elias reached into his pocket and pulled out a duplicate casing of the vintage necklace, showing me the intricate interior mechanism. "This is not a sentimental family heirloom," he continued. "Disguised beneath the brass exterior is a military-grade biometric FIDO key loaded with a custom proximity bypass protocol I developed myself. Every single time you stood within 10 feet of Julian's work laptop, the locket initiated a silent, encrypted handshake through his wireless card. It completely bypassed his firewalls, cloning his entire hard drive bit by bit and transmitting the mirrored data straight to my secure server pool in this warehouse. You did not realize it, but simply walking into your living room after work was executing a full-scale federal surveillance operation on your husband." My jaw tightened as the pieces of the puzzle began to violently lock into place. "That is why Julian was so desperate to find it. This morning," I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical wave of nausea. "He did not just think it was an ugly piece of junk. He realized what it actually was. He knew his entire digital life had been intercepted." My father nodded grimly, his eyes fixed on the streaming lines of terminal code. "Exactly. Julian must have run a localized network scan last night and detected the ghost signal transmission. He realized someone had cloned his machine. He does not know it was me, but he knows whoever holds that locket holds the absolute power to destroy him and Preston permanently. That is why they are tearing your life apart, Nia. They are running out of time and they are utterly terrified. Elias executed a heavy decryption script on the console. Watch the screen, he commanded, hitting the enter key. The spinning image of the locket vanished, replaced by flashing red progress bars that rapidly filled to 100%. A massive directory of hidden folders materialized on the display. The first layer of decrypted data began populating the monitors in an avalanche of legal documents, spreadsheet ledgers, and medical billing logs. I moved closer, my eyes straining against the bright glare of the screens. I recognized the official digital letterhead immediately. It belonged to the healthcare network where Preston operated as the chief administrator. "Look at these numbers," Trey said, stepping up beside me, his arm resting protectively over my shoulder, as Layla slept soundly in the back seat of the vehicle. "This is not just a little corporate corner cutting." My father pointed a calloused finger at a column of figures totaling over $15 million. "This is the first layer of the encrypted drive. Julian and Preston are the master architects of a massive systematic Medicare fraud ring operating right here in Atlanta. They have been fabricating thousands of ghost patients, falsifying medical necessity codes for expensive therapies, and billing the federal government for procedures that never actually happened. Preston used his administrative authority to approve the fraudulent claims, while Julian used his billing expertise to route the payments." I stared at the spreadsheets, my mind reeling as I watched the columns of stolen millions multiply. The sheer scale of their greed was sickening, but the true horror was yet to come. Elias clicked on a subfolder labeled Marketing and Communications Vendor Accounts. My breath caught sharply in my throat as a wave of pure ice-cold terror washed over my skin. Plastered across dozens of fraudulent invoices, corporate vendor registrations, and federal tax forms was the official name of my boutique public relations agency. My corporate employer identification number, my business address, and my primary banking routing numbers were listed on every single transaction sheet. "They did not just steal your personal money yesterday, Nia," my father said, his voice dropping to a harsh, grim whisper that filled the freezing cold air of the warehouse. "They have been using your legitimate PR firm as a legal shell company to launder the dirty medical payouts for the past 18 months. Preston authorized massive monthly retainers from the hospital to your agency for supposed community outreach campaigns that never existed. Then Julian used his administrative access to your business accounts to silently sweep those funds out into their offshore holdings. Every single dollar of that $15 million fraud ring has a digital footprint that leads directly back to your signature." The room seemed to spin violently around me as the full magnitude of their ruthless trap settled heavily onto my chest. They did not just want to rob me. They had systematically set me up to be their ultimate scapegoat. If the FBI raided the hospital tomorrow, the paper trail would show that I was the one who laundered the stolen federal funds through my business. Julian did not empty my bank accounts last night out of sudden rage. He did it to strip me of the financial resources to defend myself when the hammer finally fell. He and Preston were completely prepared to watch me go to federal prison for the rest of my life, leaving my innocent daughter behind just to save their own elitist skins. The man I loved, the man who promised to protect me, had systematically signed my death warrant while smiling in my face. I gripped the edge of the metal desk, my knuckles turning stark white, as my fear transformed into a raging, burning desire for absolute justice. Elias did not stop typing. His fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard, bringing up a secondary ledger buried deep within the encrypted folders. The screen shifted from domestic medical billing records to international wire transfers. These were not Medicare payouts, Nia. My father pointed to a massive column of incoming foreign deposits routing through obscure banks. These are illegal underground loans. Preston was bleeding cash to maintain his elite lifestyle, and he borrowed heavy capital from a very dangerous cartel syndicate to keep himself afloat. He used the stolen Medicare funds to pay the interest, but the principal debt is staggering, and they are demanding their money back. Elias opened the registration documents for the offshore ghost accounts holding the cartel money. The accounts were based in the Cayman Islands and Cyprus, carefully structured to evade federal oversight and hide the true beneficiaries. I leaned closer to the bright monitor, fully expecting to see my own name plastered across the forged banking documents again. Instead, I saw a string of numbers that made my blood run entirely cold. It was a 9-digit sequence I had memorized the day I brought my baby girl home from the hospital. I pointed at the screen, my finger shaking violently. "Dad, whose account is that?" My father stopped typing. He looked at the numbers, then looked at me, his face draining of all color. He pulled up the identity verification file attached to the offshore account. A scanned copy of a birth certificate filled the massive monitor. It was Laylas. "Julian did not just use your business as a legal shield," Trey said, his voice thick with absolute disgust. "He used his own 6-year-old daughter's social security number to open the ghost accounts for the cartel money." The sheer monstrous reality of his actions crashed into me. Julian had stolen my business, stolen my hard-earned money, and framed me for federal fraud. But weaponizing our innocent child crossed a line of pure evil I did not know existed. He had permanently tied Layla's identity to international money laundering and cartel debt. If the federal authorities raided those accounts, Layla would have a massive financial crime record before she even learned how to multiply fractions. If the cartel came looking for their money, they would be looking for the name on the account. Julian was fully prepared to throw his own flesh and blood to the wolves just to protect his elite lifestyle and his arrogant brother-in-law. He was going to let us both take the fall and rot. I looked back at the back seat of the SUV where Layla was still sleeping peacefully, hugging her stuffed bear. My husband was dead to me. The man I married was a complete illusion, and the parasite standing in his place was going to pay for every single thing he had done. Dawn began to break outside the warehouse, casting thin beams of pale morning light through the dirty skylights above the server racks. The cold industrial air felt suffocating. Suddenly, the silence of the tactical command center was shattered by a loud, aggressive buzzing. It was my cell phone sitting on the metal desk where I had placed it hours ago. Then Trey's phone started ringing. A second later, my father's secure mobile device lit up like a Christmas tree. Elias grabbed my phone before I could reach it, examining the locked screen with a sharp eye. "You have 97 missed calls, Nia. Text messages are flooding in from every person in your contact list. Your clients, your friends, your neighbors are all trying to reach you." Trey pulled his own phone from his tactical vest and opened a local news application. His jaw dropped. "Nia, look at this right now." Trey handed me his device. A live morning news broadcast was streaming on the screen. The banner running across the bottom of the video read, "Breaking news silver alert, issued for missing child and mother." The camera cut to a live press conference taking place right on the front lawn of my house. The flashing red and blue lights of police cruisers illuminated the background, painting the neighborhood in a sinister glow. Standing behind a cluster of microphones was Julian. He was flanked by Preston and his sister, who were both wearing expressions of deep manufactured concern. Julian looked completely devastated. He was not wearing his usual tailored suit, but a wrinkled, oversized sweater looking exactly like a desperate, terrified father who had been up all night. His eyes were red and puffy, and he was physically shaking as he gripped the edges of the wooden podium. Early this morning, I woke up to find my beautiful wife, Nia, and my 6-year-old daughter, Layla, missing Julian, said, his voice cracking with perfect theatrical emotion. "Nia has been suffering from severe, untreated mental health issues for the past few months. She has been experiencing dangerous paranoid delusions and extreme manic episodes." I stared at the screen, completely paralyzed by the sheer audacity of his performance. He wiped a fake tear from his cheek and looked directly into the news cameras. "We discovered this morning that Nia suffered a complete psychotic break. She emptied our entire life savings, taking over $450,000 from our joint accounts, and fled the house in the middle of the night. She is not in her right mind. She is a danger to herself, and she is a danger to our little girl. Please, if anyone has seen my wife, do not approach her. Call the authorities immediately. I just want my baby back. Please, Nia, bring Layla home so we can get you the psychiatric help you so desperately need. Preston stepped up to the microphone, putting a supportive hand on Julian's shoulder, playing the role of the protective wealthy family patriarch. My hospital network is offering a $50,000 reward for any information leading to the safe return of my niece Layla Preston, announced smoothly. We have mobilized private investigators, and we are working directly with the Atlanta Police Department. We will not stop until this family is reunited and Nia receives the medical intervention she requires. I handed the phone back to Trey, my hands trembling with absolute fury. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Julian had not just stolen my money and framed me for massive federal fraud. He was actively gaslighting the entire city. He was using the missing funds he stole to paint me as a deranged criminal mother. By issuing a statewide silver alert and declaring me mentally unstable, he ensured that if I went to the police with my story, they would dismiss me as a delusional, paranoid woman. He was using Preston's deep pockets and elite connections to weaponize law enforcement against me. Every police officer, every citizen, and every news station in the state was now actively hunting me down, believing I was a threat to my own child. We were completely trapped. The silence in the warehouse was deafening after the news broadcast ended. I stared at the frozen image of my husband crying fake tears on the monitor. We were completely trapped. Preston was not just using the media to paint me as a villain. He was weaponizing his elite social status to turn the entire state infrastructure against me. My father brought up a police scanner feed on one of his secondary monitors. The radio chatter was chaotic and constant. Dispatchers were writing my license plate number, my physical description, and Layla's height and weight to every patrol car in the greater Atlanta area. Preston had called in massive favors from the police commissioner, a man who frequently attended their exclusive country club dinners. They had escalated my status to armed and dangerous based entirely on Julian's fabricated testimony. Any police officer who spotted me would not ask questions. They would draw their weapons first, believing I was a deranged mother capable of harming my own child. My cell phone lit up again, vibrating aggressively against the metal desk. The caller ID showed Julian's personal cell number. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I instinctively reached out to decline the call. "Do not hang up," Elias snapped, grabbing my wrist. His eyes were wide with sudden, intense focus. "Answer it, Nia. Keep him talking for as long as you possibly can. I need at least 90 seconds to isolate his cellular signal and bounce it through my decryption servers. If I can pinpoint his exact physical location and see whose network he is connected to, I can figure out his next move." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my violently shaking hands. I swiped the green button and pressed the phone to my ear. I did not say a single word. I just waited, listening to the background noise on the other end of the line. "Nia," Julian said. His voice was soft, dripping with that same manufactured gentle concern he had just used on the television broadcast. "I know you are scared, baby. I know you are confused. But you have to come home right now. You are not thinking clearly at all." The sheer manipulation made me physically nauseous. "You stole Layla's future Julian," I said, keeping my voice dangerously quiet. "You drained my business accounts. You used our daughter's social security number to open cartel accounts. Do not speak to me like I am the one losing my mind." Julian let out a heavy, dramatic sigh, perfectly calculated to sound like an exhausted patient husband dealing with a severe psychiatric patient. "Nia, listen to yourself," he replied, his tone oozing with extreme condescension. "You are completely paranoid. You are having delusions again. Nobody stole anything. You took the money in a manic state, but I am not mad at you. I just want my wife and my daughter back safe. Just bring the necklace back, Nia, that old brass locket your dad gave you. You accidentally packed it, and Preston really wants to look at it for an antique appraisal. Bring the necklace back and Preston can get you the psychiatric help you need. We have a private, comfortable room waiting for you at his best facility. We will fix this together." He was actively threatening to lock me in a psychiatric ward under Preston's complete control. If I walked back into that house with the Fido key, they would heavily sedate me, toss me into a padded room, and leave me there to rot indefinitely while they laundered their stolen millions. Before I could formulate a proper response, the phone was suddenly snatched away on the other end. A sharp, shrill voice pierced through the speaker. "Listen to me, you ungrateful ghetto trash," Julian's sister hissed. Her voice was pure venom, stripped of all the fake elegance she usually displayed at their elite galas. "You are ruining our family name. Do you have any idea how much damage you are doing to our reputation right now? We let you into our circle. We allowed you to sit at our tables, and this is exactly how you repay us. You steal my brother's money and kidnap my niece." I looked up at Elias. He was typing furiously, sweat beading on his forehead, as a highly detailed map of Atlanta appeared on his largest monitor. A red dot was bouncing rapidly between cell towers, trying to lock onto a specific grid. "Keep her talking," Elias mouthed, pointing urgently at the screen. "Your elite family name is a complete joke," I shot back, pouring every ounce of my anger into the receiver. "You are all a bunch of broke frauds living off stolen Medicare funds and dangerous cartel loans. Your brother is a criminal and Preston is a thief." Julian's sister gasped in absolute outrage. "You are a delusional street rat," she screamed. "Preston is going to make sure you never see the light of day again. When the police find you, they are going to throw you in a straitjacket. You will never see Layla again. You are entirely unfit to be a mother. You are a complete embarrassment to everything we stand for." "Got him," Elias announced, hitting a final key with a loud clack. The red dot on the digital map stopped bouncing and locked onto a specific geographic coordinate. I ended the call immediately, tossing the phone back onto the metal desk. My chest was heaving as the echoes of their vicious threats faded into the cold air of the warehouse. I looked at the map, expecting to see their location pinned at our house or Preston's hospital. Instead, the red dot was glowing brightly over a highly secure gated estate in the wealthiest district of Buckhead. "They are not at the police station or the hospital," Elias said, analyzing the network traffic radiating from their location. "They are operating out of a private residence belonging to a federal judge. Preston is using his elite connections to pull strings at the highest levels of the state judicial system. They are actively drafting a sealed court order to terminate your parental rights permanently and grant Preston emergency conservatorship over Layla." Trey slammed his fist against a heavy server rack. "If Preston gets legal conservatorship, he completely controls Layla. And if he controls Layla, he legally controls the cartel accounts opened under her name. They will have full legal authority to move the entire $15 million without triggering any federal banking alarms." We were entirely out of time. I desperately needed a lawyer. I needed someone who knew the system inside and out and could file an emergency injunction to block Preston's legal maneuvers before a corrupt judge signed my daughter away to a criminal syndicate. I needed my best friend. She was a high-powered attorney right here in Atlanta, and she was the only person in the legal world I trusted with my life. I reached for my burner phone, ready to make the most critical call of my existence, unaware that the elite family had already anticipated my next move. I pulled a fresh burner phone from my father's tactical supply crate. My hands were shaking, but my mind was laser-focused. I needed a legal shield right now. Preston was moving rapidly to strip away my parental rights and hand my daughter over to a cartel syndicate. I dialed the private cell number of my best friend Simone. Simone and I had met during our freshman year of college. She was now one of the most ruthless and successful family law attorneys in all of Atlanta. If anyone knew how to file an emergency injunction and block a corrupt judge from signing a fraudulent conservatorship order, it was her. We had shared our deepest secrets. She was Layla's godmother. I trusted her with my absolute life. The line rang twice before she answered. Her voice sounded strained and breathless. "Nia," she gasped. "Oh my God, Nia, where are you? The police came by my office an hour ago asking questions about you. Julian is on every news channel saying you had a breakdown. Tell me you are safe." I let out a heavy sigh of relief at the sound of her familiar voice. The sheer comfort of hearing someone who cared about me almost brought me to tears. "I am safe, Simone," I whispered, glancing over at Layla sleeping in the back of the SUV. "I am not crazy. Julian and Preston are framing me. They are running a massive Medicare fraud ring, and they used my agency as a shell company to launder $15 million. Now they are trying to take Layla because Julian opened cartel accounts using her social security number. I need you to file an emergency injunction to stop Preston from getting legal conservatorship. He is with a judge right now trying to terminate my rights." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "That is absolutely insane," Nia Simone replied, her voice trembling with what sounded like genuine horror. "But I believe you. I know you would never hurt Layla, and I know Julian has always been a manipulative narcissist. I will draft the injunction paperwork right this second. I have a clerk at the federal courthouse who can file it under seal, bypassing the local corrupt judges entirely. But I need to know your exact location, Nia. I need to send a private secure courier to get your physical signature on the affidavits right now. If we do not file this within the hour, Preston will win." I opened my mouth to give her the address of the abandoned warehouse. I was so desperate for a lifeline that I was entirely willing to hand over our exact coordinates. But before I could speak a single word, Elias slammed his hand down hard on the metal desk. His eyes widened in absolute panic. He pointed a frantic finger at his main monitor and violently shook his head side to side. "Do not tell her where we are," my father mouthed, his face pale with sudden terror. I froze completely. The tone of my father's silent command was absolute. "Simone," I said, my voice faltering slightly, "I cannot tell you exactly where I am yet. Just draft the paperwork and I will call you back in 10 minutes with a secure meeting location." I hung up the burner phone immediately, severing the connection. "What is wrong?" I demanded, looking at Elias. "Why did you stop me?" My father did not answer right away. He was typing furiously on his mechanical keyboard, running a complex trace program through his encrypted servers. "I just ran a localized network scan on the burner phone you used." Elias explained, his voice tight with anger. "I wanted to make sure your call was not intercepted by the police, but I found something much worse. I isolated Simone's cellular signal during your conversation. Look at the screen, Nia." I stepped closer to the glowing monitors. Elias had pulled up a digital communication log tracking Simone's phone number. The very second I ended my call with her, she initiated a new outgoing call. The destination number was displayed in bright red text. It was Preston's private executive line. I felt the blood drain entirely from my face. My father hit a keystroke and patched the live audio of their conversation directly through the warehouse speakers. Simone's voice echoed through the cold industrial room, but the warm, sympathetic tone she had just used with me was completely gone. She sounded entirely cold and transactional. "Preston." "It is Simone," she said sharply. "She just called me from a burner phone. She knows about the Medicare fraud and the cartel accounts in the child's name. She wanted me to file an emergency injunction to block your conservatorship." Preston chuckled on the other end of the line, his deep voice sending shivers down my spine. "Did you get her location?" he asked smoothly. "Not yet," Simone replied, sounding annoyed. "Her father is with her and he must have warned her." She hung up before giving me the address, but she said she would call back in 10 minutes with a meeting spot. "Have your private security team ready to deploy the second she gives me the location. We will snatch her up before she even knows what hit her." I stood there completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. My best friend, the woman who stood beside me at my wedding and held my daughter in the delivery room, had sold me out without a second of hesitation. "Preston promised you the partnership at the new law firm, did he not, Simone?" I whispered, even though she could not hear me. The elite family had used their immense wealth to buy off my entire support system, poisoning every single lifeline I possessed. I was utterly alone, facing an empire with limitless resources and power over everything I loved. I closed my eyes and just breathed to survive. The damp air of the subterranean drainage tunnel clung to my skin as we waded through ankle-deep murky water. Trey led the way with a tactical flashlight, cutting through the absolute darkness, while I carried Layla tightly against my chest. She was shivering, burying her face into my cold shoulder. Elias brought up the rear, ensuring we were not followed by Preston's mercenaries. The echoing sounds of the flash, bang traps going off in the warehouse above us had finally faded into a distant muffled thud. We walked for what felt like hours, navigating the labyrinth of forgotten city infrastructure. Finally, Trey stopped in front of a rusted iron ladder, leading up to a heavy maintenance grate. We climbed out into the freezing night air, emerging inside a derelict subway maintenance depot. It was an off-the-books location Trey had scouted years ago during his military days. The room was structurally sound, completely underground, and entirely invisible to cellular tracing networks. Trey locked the heavy reinforced door behind us, sliding a massive iron bolt into place. We collapsed onto the dusty concrete floor, gasping for breath. I held Layla close, wrapping her in my jacket, as she continued to sleep through the sheer exhaustion of our escape. Elias did not waste a single second resting. He immediately unzipped his waterproof tactical bag and pulled out a ruggedized military laptop. He powered it on the screen, casting a harsh blue glow across his exhausted face. He unclasped the vintage brass locket from my neck, his hands remarkably steady despite the chaotic pursuit we had just survived. He plugged the FIDO key into the terminal and began typing furiously, trying to package the digital evidence so we could finally hand it over to the federal authorities. "We have to go to the FBI right now," I whispered, my voice hoarse from the damp tunnel air. "We have the data proving Julian and Preston orchestrated the Medicare fraud. We have the proof about the cartel accounts in Laylas' name. We just need to give it to them and end this nightmare." Elias did not answer. He kept typing, his brow furrowing deeper with every line of code that cascaded down his screen. The rhythmic clicking of his keyboard suddenly stopped. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the underground depot. Elias stared at the monitor, his face completely draining of color. "We have a massive problem, Nia," he said, his voice dropping to a grim whisper. I stood up, leaving Layla sleeping safely on Trey's tactical jacket, and walked over to the laptop. "What is wrong?" I demanded, feeling a new wave of panic rising in my chest. Elias pointed at a red warning banner flashing rapidly across the center of his screen. "The data on your locket is incomplete," he explained. When I cloned Julian's hard drive, I extracted the entire data packet, but the core ledgers are secured behind a dual authentication military encryption protocol. The first layer is open, but the second layer is locked entirely solid. I stared at him, trying to process his technical explanation. "What does that mean for us, Dad?" I asked, my voice trembling. "It means that if you walk into an FBI field office right now, you will be arrested on the spot," Elias replied bluntly. "The open layer of data we can currently access only shows the financial records of the shell company. It shows your public relations agency receiving and laundering the $15 million. The secondary layer, which contains the digital signatures proving Julian and Preston actually authorized the transfers and manipulated the accounts, is completely locked. Julian designed this system perfectly. He engineered the visible data to frame you while keeping his and Preston's guilt buried behind a digital fortress." The walls of the concrete depot seemed to close in around me. Julian had accounted for every single vulnerability. He had turned my own business into a weapon, and engineered a trap so flawless that even running to the authorities would seal my doom. "How do we unlock the secondary layer?" Trey asked, stepping forward and staring hard at the flashing red prompt. "We need the physical encryption key," Elias stated, his fingers flying across the keyboard to trace the origin of the security protocol. "It is not a password or a digital code. It is a level 2 master key. It is a piece of localized hardware that must be physically plugged into a terminal to decrypt the cartel ledgers and the Medicare fraud proof." Elias ran a reverse diagnostic ping through the security architecture, mapping the digital footprint of the master key. "Got it," he announced, his eyes narrowing at the screen. "The master token is registered to a localized static IP address. It is not in Julian's possession. It is locked inside a biometric safe located directly inside Preston's private executive suite at the hospital administration wing." I looked at Trey, and then at my father, the sheer insanity of our situation settling heavily onto my shoulders. We could not run. We could not hide. We could not simply hand the locket over to the police, because Simone had already proven that Preston's money could buy off anyone in Atlanta. If we did nothing, I would be hunted down by private mercenaries and framed for a multi-million-dollar federal crime, while my daughter was handed over to a cartel syndicate. The only way to clear my name, to save Layla, and to destroy the empire Julian and Preston had built was to acquire that physical hardware token. "We have to go back out there," I said, my voice surprisingly calm as my terror morphed into cold, calculated resolve. We have to break into the hospital and steal the master key from Preston's office. Trey looked at me, a fierce, determined smile spreading across his face. We are going to war, he said quietly, checking the magazine of his sidearm. It was no longer about escaping. It was about striking back and taking everything from the men who tried to bury us. The cold concrete of the underground maintenance depot felt like an absolute prison as the reality of our situation fully settled over me. I stood staring at my father's glowing laptop screen, watching the fraudulent documents scroll past. My name, my signature, my boutique agency branding. Every single piece of fabricated evidence was meticulously designed to paint me as the solitary mastermind behind a $15 million Medicare fraud syndicate. Julian had spent years playing the role of a supportive husband while secretly building a digital guillotine directly over my neck. He had smiled at me across the dinner table, kissed our daughter goodnight, and systematically forged a paper trail so flawless that the federal government would never look past me. If we go to the authorities right now, you are walking straight into a federal indictment, Elias said, his voice heavy with the grim truth. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit does not deal in nuance, Nia. They deal in paper trails. And right now, the paper trail says you opened those offshore ghost accounts. It says you authorized the billing manipulation. The secondary encrypted layer of this hard drive is the only thing containing Julian's digital signature and Preston's administrative override codes. Without unlocking that secondary layer to prove they pulled the strings, the authorities will simply see a desperate woman trying to blame her wealthy, innocent husband and his highly respected brother-in-law. I paced the length of the dusty depot, my boots echoing against the concrete. The sheer magnitude of Julian's trap was breathtaking. He had weaponized the very business I had bled to build. Every late night I spent securing public relations clients, every networking event I attended to grow my agency, it was all just cover for their money laundering operation. He needed a legitimate working-class business to wash the dirty hospital funds, and I was the perfect unwitting participant. Preston must have laughed at me every single time I talked about my agency growth. They were funneling millions through my accounts while I proudly celebrated landing minor contracts. How do we get that specific encryption key? I demanded, turning back to my father and Trey. If it is locked inside a biometric safe in Preston's executive office, how are we supposed to physically extract it without getting caught? Preston runs that hospital like a fortress. He has private security roaming the corridors and keycard access points at every single elevator bank. Elias brought up a wireframe schematic of the hospital network on his secondary monitor. As the chief hospital administrator, Preston does not trust cloud storage for his illicit cartel ledgers, my father explained, pointing to a heavily shielded server node on the digital map. He operates old school. The Level 2 master key is a customized physical hardware token. It looks like a standard flash drive, but it is embedded with a rotating cryptographic algorithm. It acts as the literal key to the digital lock holding the secondary data layer closed. It never leaves his office. He keeps it secured inside a localized biometric wall safe behind his mahogany desk. Trey leaned over the console, his military tactical training immediately kicking into high gear. Biometric means fingerprint or retinal scan. Trey noted, his eyes narrowing at the schematic. We cannot just crack a safe like that with a crowbar or a digital bypass. If we trigger the tamper failsafe, the safe will permanently lock down and silently alert the hospital security detail. We need a way to trick the scanner into thinking Preston is the one opening it. Elias typed a rapid sequence of commands into his terminal. I am already 2 steps ahead of him, my father stated, a fierce glint appearing in his eyes. When I engineered the vintage brass locket to clone Julian's laptop, I did not just copy the hard drive. The FIDO key protocol was designed to scrape residual biometric data from the device's fingerprint reader. Julian and Preston frequently shared access to the encrypted ledgers. I have extracted a partial digital composite of Preston's thumbprint from the residual data logs. I can synthesize a 3-dimensional topographic map of his fingerprint and print a synthetic overlay using the portable resin fabricator in my tactical bag. I watched my father pull a compact black device from his equipment crate. He was essentially building a physical duplicate of Preston's fingerprint right in front of my eyes. The technical brilliance of my father was the only reason we were not already in federal custody. But having the fingerprint was only one piece of a highly dangerous puzzle. We still have to physically breach the building. I pointed out, the adrenaline making my hands shake slightly. Preston's executive suite is on the top floor of the administration wing. We cannot just walk through the front doors of the hospital. Julian issued a statewide silver alert this morning. My face is plastered across every local news channel and police scanner in Atlanta. The second I step foot into a public building, someone is going to recognize me and call the authorities immediately. Trey pulled a rolled-up architectural blueprint from his jacket pocket and spread it out across the metal desk. "Then we do not walk through the front doors, Nia," he said, his voice completely devoid of fear. "I did security contracting work for that hospital complex 2 years ago, before Preston took over the administration board. The executive wing has a dedicated subterranean loading dock used exclusively for secure medical waste disposal and private VIP transport. The security cameras in the underground loading bay run on an automated loop. There is exactly a 15-minute blind spot during the shift change at midnight." Elias synchronized his laptop with Trey's blueprints, bringing up the guard patrol schedules. "Trey is right," my father confirmed. "The night shift security detail swaps out at exactly midnight. The loading dock cameras perform a hard reset, wiping the temporary cache. For exactly 15 minutes, the subterranean entrance is completely unmonitored. If we can get you inside the building through the waste disposal bay, you can use the service elevators to bypass the main lobby entirely and reach the upper floors unseen." I stared at the blueprints, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had spent my entire life playing by the rules, paying my taxes, and building an honest living. Now I was standing in an underground maintenance depot, actively plotting a high-stakes heist against a corrupt hospital administrator and a cartel-backed syndicate. The transition from a terrified victim to an active combatant felt incredibly surreal, but it also felt empowering. I was no longer running blindly into the dark. I had a target. "We are going to do this," I said, my voice steady and absolute. "We are going to break into that hospital, steal the master key from Preston's safe, and decrypt the secondary ledgers. I am not going to let Julian use my daughter to pay off his cartel debts, and I am not going to spend the rest of my life in a federal prison for crimes they committed against me." Trey loaded a fresh magazine into his sidearm, the metallic click echoing loudly in the damp depot. "I will get you past the outer security checkpoints and through the service elevator," Trey promised. "But once we reach the executive suite, I have to stay in the corridor to monitor the guard patrols. You will have to enter Preston's office alone, Nia. You will have less than 3 minutes to bypass the biometric safe, grab the hardware token, and get out before the security loop resets and traps us inside." I nodded, pulling my jacket tighter around my shoulders as I looked over at Layla, who was still sleeping peacefully nearby. I was ready to risk absolutely everything to take them down and protect my daughter from their toxic elite empire. The freezing night air bit at my cheeks as Trey led me down the dark alleyway toward a rusted chain-link fence. Hidden just beyond the perimeter sat a heavy white medical waste disposal van. The side panels featured the faded logo of a legitimate sanitation contractor. Trey unlocked the back doors, pulling out 2 oversized, heavy-duty coveralls stained with simulated chemical residue. "Put this on and keep your head down," he instructed, handing me a dark blue baseball cap and a thick surgical mask. "The cameras will not see our faces, but we need to match them perfectly." I slid the bulky coveralls over my dark jacket, pulling the mask high over the bridge of my nose. The fabric smelled faintly of bleach and industrial chemicals, creating the perfect olfactory illusion. Trey climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. The heavy diesel motor roared to life, vibrating the metal floorboards beneath my feet. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching the synthetic fingerprint inside my pocket. Elias spoke through the encrypted earpiece hidden in my right ear. His voice was a calm, digital whisper cutting through my racing heartbeat, filling the silent and cold, dark space. "You have 10 minutes until the shift change," Elias reported. "The outer perimeter guards are currently logging out of the primary dispatch system. They are tired and completely distracted. Approach the subterranean gate now." Trey shifted the heavy van into drive, and we rolled slowly onto the deserted city streets. We navigated toward the towering glass and steel structure of Preston's hospital. The building loomed against the night sky like a massive, impenetrable fortress. We bypassed the brightly lit main entrance where multiple police cruisers were currently idling. Instead, Trey steered the van down a steep concrete ramp very quickly. The ramp led directly into the subterranean loading dock. A heavy steel security barricade blocked our path. A lone security guard stepped out of the illuminated toll booth, holding a clipboard and looking incredibly bored. My heart slammed aggressively against my ribs. I lowered my chin, letting the brim of the baseball cap hide my eyes completely. Trey rolled down his window, letting the strong scent of the bleach-soaked coveralls waft out into the cold night air. The guard pinched his nose in deep disgust, waving his hand dismissively toward the gate without asking us a single extra question. "You guys are late," the guard grumbled, not even bothering to check the license plate or the contractor manifest. "The system reboots in exactly 5 minutes. Drop the biohazard bins at Bay 4 and get out before the new shift supervisor writes you up." Trey nodded silently, pressing a small button on the dashboard. The heavy steel barricade slowly raised and we rolled forward into the sprawling underground parking cavern. "We did it!" I exhaled softly, the tension leaving my stiff shoulders for a fraction of a second. "We are not clear yet," Trey replied, steering the heavy van forward. He parked in the designated bay and killed the engine. He checked his tactical watch. It was exactly 11:55. Elias came back over the earpiece immediately. "The security cameras are officially down." Elias announced, the sound of frantic typing echoing through the audio feed. "The visual cache is completely clearing right now. You have exactly 15 minutes to breach the suite, grab the master key, and get back to the freight elevator. Move right now." We jumped out of the van and sprinted across the loading dock toward a pair of massive, heavy, and solid industrial metal doors. The corridors of the subterranean level were stark, sterile, and bathed in harsh, white fluorescent light. Every single footstep we took echoed loudly against the linoleum floor, making me cringe with absolute terror. We navigated the maze of basement corridors, with Trey checking every intersection with military precision. We reached the freight elevator tucked away in a restricted access zone. Trey pulled a cloned magnetic keycard from his vest, swiping it against the black reader panel. The light blinked green and the heavy metal doors slid open silently. We stepped inside and Trey hit the button for floor number 12. The elevator hummed as it began its rapid ascent, carrying us straight into the heart of Preston's corrupt empire. The ride felt agonizingly slow. I stared at the digital floor indicator, watching the red numbers climb higher and higher. When the doors finally parted, we stepped out into the executive administration wing. The contrast between the basement and this floor was incredibly jarring. The linoleum was replaced by thick, expensive carpet that completely absorbed the sound of our footsteps. The walls were lined with abstract modern art and warm ambient lighting. It literally reeked of absolute wealthy elite privilege immediately. Trey signaled for me to stop as we approached the grand double doors of Preston's private suite. He swiped the cloned badge one final time. A soft mechanical click signaled the heavy lock releasing. "This is as far as I go," Nia, Trey whispered, taking a defensive stance in the hallway. "I will monitor the guard patrol routes from here. You have 3 minutes left before the cameras reboot entirely. Get the key and get out immediately." I pushed the heavy oak door open and slipped inside the office alone. Preston's suite was completely massive and deeply intimidating right inside. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the skyline. In the center sat a solid mahogany desk, clear. I rushed around the desk, dropping to my knees. Elias had told me the biometric safe was hidden behind a false wooden panel on the bottom right drawer. My fingertips brushed against a small indentation. I pressed hard and the panel popped off, revealing a sleek titanium safe. A small circular fingerprint scanner glowed, waiting for authorization. My hands shook violently as I pulled out the synthetic silicone print coated in thermal gel. I pressed it firmly against the scanner. For one agonizing second, nothing happened. The circular light remained a solid, aggressive red, illuminating the dark space under the desk. My heart hammered against my ribs so loudly, I was certain the sound would echo down the corridor. A drop of cold sweat rolled down the back of my neck. Then the light flashed a brilliant, welcoming green. A soft mechanical click resonated from deep inside the titanium safe, followed by the heavy thud of the locking bolts retracting. I pulled the heavy door open. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, was the Level 2 master key. It was a rugged matte black hardware token slightly larger than a standard flash drive, with a digital counter displaying a rotating sequence of cryptographic numbers. I grabbed it immediately, clutching the cold metal tight in my palm. The physical weight of our salvation was finally in my hands. I slipped the hardware token deep into my interior jacket pocket and secured the zipper tight. I pushed the titanium door shut and carefully snapped the false wooden panel back into place. Just as I began to stand up, a sharp crackle erupted in my encrypted earpiece. "Nia, get out of there right now," Trey whispered, his voice laced with pure, unfiltered panic. "Someone is coming down the main corridor. It is Preston. He is not alone, and they are moving fast." My blood turned to absolute ice. The security cameras were still down for another 4 minutes, but Preston had returned early. I scrambled out from behind the desk, my boots sliding slightly on the plush, expensive carpet. I sprinted toward the grand double doors, but before my hand could even brush the brass handles, I heard the heavy, unmistakable sound of Preston's deep voice echoing just a few feet away. He was right outside in the hallway, talking furiously to someone. I froze in utter terror. There was no way I could open the doors without walking straight into him. "Trey, what do I do?" I whispered frantically into the hidden microphone in my collar. I heard a soft shuffling sound from the corridor outside. "I cannot get to the service elevator," Trey replied, his voice barely a breath. "I am trapped in the hallway. I am going up." There was a faint scraping noise followed by the distinct sound of a ceiling tile shifting out of place. Trey was utilizing his military urban evasion training, pulling himself into the overhead ventilation crawlspace above the executive corridor. He was safe for the moment, but I was completely trapped inside a brightly lit office with nowhere to run. The heavy brass doorknob began to turn. I threw myself backward, executing a desperate silent dive toward the massive mahogany desk in the center of the room. The piece of furniture was an enormous antique built like a fortress with a deep recessed footwell extending far back into the shadows. I slid underneath it, pulling my knees tightly against my chest and wrapping my arms around my legs to make myself as small as physically possible. I pressed my back hard against the cold wooden modesty panel, trying to blend entirely into the darkness. A second later, the heavy double doors swung open with a forceful whoosh of air. The bright overhead lights of the executive suite flicked to maximum illumination, instantly bathing the room in a harsh, unforgiving glare. Preston marched into the office, the sharp, authoritative clicking of his hard leather soles hitting the carpet like a military drumbeat. He was completely furious, his voice booming off the glass walls. "I do not care what the police commissioner said," Preston shouted, slamming his heavy briefcase down onto the top of the desk right above my head. "Julian is acting like a complete idiot on national television. He is bringing way too much heat to my hospital. You need to call our private contractors right now and tell them to sweep the entire west side of the city. Find Nia before the local cops do. The local cops will ask questions. My contractors will just make her disappear permanently." I held my breath, pressing my lips tightly together. Every muscle in my body was locked in agonizing tension. Preston walked around the side of the massive desk, his heavy footsteps approaching my hiding spot. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable moment when he would look down and discover me cowering in the shadows. Instead, the heavy leather executive chair squeaked loudly as Preston threw himself into it. He rolled the chair forward, pulling himself close to the desk. His expensive, polished Italian leather shoes came to a dead stop exactly 3 inches away from my face. I could smell the sharp scent of his expensive cologne mixed with the faint metallic odor of shoe polish. If I reached out a single finger, I could touch the laces of his dress shoes. I squeezed my eyes shut, terrified that even the slight movement of my eyelashes might draw his attention downward. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was absolutely blinding, making my ears ring loudly. I had to consciously force my lungs to take shallow, silent sips of air. My chest burned with the effort of remaining completely motionless. The person Preston was talking to must have been standing near the doorway. "But sir," a second voice said, sounding nervous and hesitant. "The FBI has already started sniffing around the Medicare billing anomalies. Julian transferring those funds out of the business accounts flagged a federal monitor." If we eliminate his wife now, it might look too suspicious. The feds are going to want a living scapegoat to put on trial. We need her alive long enough to sign the confession documents Julian drafted. Preston let out a harsh, cruel laugh that rattled the wood of the desk above me. He shifted in his chair, his right shoe brushing casually against the fabric of my dark jacket. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted copper, praying the thick material masked the contact. "You worry too much," Preston sneered. "Nia is a nobody. She is a working-class girl from the wrong side of town who married up. Nobody is going to question a tragedy involving a woman experiencing a severe psychotic break. Julian has laid the groundwork perfectly. When my men find her, they will stage a struggle. We will say she resisted and things got out of hand. The cartel gets their money washed clean tonight and Julian gets to play the grieving widower tomorrow. It is a perfect closed loop." I sat frozen under the desk, listening to the wealthy hospital administrator casually plan my brutal murder. He spoke about taking my life with the same detached annoyance one might use when discussing a delayed flight or a bad restaurant reservation. He truly believed his money and status made him a god capable of erasing anyone who stood in the way of his illicit empire. The sheer callousness of his words ignited a burning, white-hot rage deep inside my core. The fear that had paralyzed me seconds ago began to evaporate completely, replaced by a fierce, terrifying determination to survive. I clutched the master key inside my jacket pocket, feeling its solid weight against my chest. "I am sending you the updated coordinates for the private security sweep." Preston commanded, his chair squeaking again as he leaned forward to type on his keyboard. "Just get it done quickly. I have to go deal with the cartel representatives in 10 minutes. They are getting anxious about the delay in the offshore transfer. We need to process the final batch of Medicare claims before midnight. Tell Julian to keep his mouth shut and stay off the television until I give the order." The secondary voice agreed quickly, and the sound of receding footsteps echoed toward the door. The heavy oak doors clicked shut, leaving Preston entirely alone in the office. My legs were beginning to cramp painfully from being curled into such a tight, restrictive ball. The silence in the room was suffocating, broken only by the rapid clicking of Preston's keyboard and his occasional frustrated sighs. He was inches away, completely oblivious to the fact that the woman he had just ordered a hit on was sitting right beneath his feet, holding the very device that would send him to federal prison for the rest of his life. I watched his leather shoes shift restlessly on the carpet, waiting agonizingly for my incredibly narrow window of escape. A vibrating cell phone broke the stifling silence. It was the harsh buzz of a cheap disposable burner. I watched Preston's leather shoes shift as he reached into his pocket. He answered immediately. His voice lost its arrogant quality, becoming carefully measured and carrying suppressed panic. "Yes, I am here," Preston said. "The transfer is currently processing. You do not need to call me constantly. We had a slight complication with the authorities, but I contained the situation." I reached into my pocket, moving with excruciating slowness. I pulled out my mobile device, ensuring the volume was entirely muted. I opened the voice recorder and pressed the red button. Holding the device flat against my chest, I pointed the microphone upward toward the mahogany desk. I recorded every single syllable. The person on the other end spoke loudly, causing a faint, aggressive buzzing. Whatever they said made Preston slam his fist down hard on the desktop. The sudden impact made me flinch, pressing my spine painfully against the wooden modesty panel. "Listen to me closely," Preston hissed. "I am the chief administrator of this medical network. I have politicians and judges eating out of my hand. You are getting your $15 million plus the interest penalty. The Medicare funds have been successfully routed through the public relations shell company. We are waiting for offshore clearance." Another pause followed, filled with angry, distorted shouting from the cartel creditor. Preston shifted his weight, his expensive leather shoes scraping harshly against the carpet right next to my hiding spot. "I do not care what Julian promised you." Preston fired back, dripping with absolute venom. Julian is a disposable asset. He served his purpose by manipulating the billing software and bringing his naive wife into the fold. But he is a liability now. Do not worry about him. Julian is taking the fall, his wife is going to prison, and your money will be washed clean by tomorrow morning. I arranged for the physical evidence to point directly to her business accounts. By the time federal agents figure out what happened, I will have dissolved the holding companies. I stared at the glowing red recording timer. 2 minutes and 14 seconds. I had captured the ultimate smoking gun. Preston had just confessed to the entire $15 million Medicare fraud, the cartel money laundering, and the premeditated conspiracy to frame me while throwing his brother-in-law to the wolves. This single audio file was the definitive nail in their coffin. Combined with the master key sitting heavily in my pocket, I possessed everything I needed to burn their elite empire straight to the ground. Preston ended the call, tossing the burner phone onto the desk. He pulled open a filing drawer, retrieving a stack of documents. I glanced down at my watch. The glowing numbers read 12:06. The security cameras across the hospital were scheduled to reboot in exactly 4 minutes. If I did not reach the subterranean freight elevator before the system came online, the night shift supervisor would spot me. The entire building would go into total lockdown. I would be trapped, surrounded by armed guards with the most incriminating evidence in my pockets. Panic clawed up my throat. Preston was not leaving. He settled back into his executive chair, flipping through a thick file, preparing to work through the cartel logistics. I was completely pinned under his desk. If I crawled out, he would see me instantly. If I stayed hidden, I would miss the extraction window and face certain capture. Suddenly, a blinding strobe light flashed through the frosted glass doors. A deafening mechanical siren erupted in the hallway outside. It was not a standard fire alarm. It was a high-pitched shriek accompanied by an automated voice broadcasting over the public address system. Warning code orange. Hazardous chemical spill detected in the adjacent laboratory sector. Immediate containment protocol initiated. Evacuate the 12th floor immediately. My brother Trey had utilized his military background to access the environmental control panels from the crawlspace above. He had intentionally triggered a localized hazardous material alarm in the neighboring wing to create the ultimate distraction. Preston jumped up, knocking his chair backward with a loud crash. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. I watched his leather shoes pivot sharply toward the door. He grabbed his briefcase and sprinted out of the office, leaving the heavy oak doors swinging wide open behind him. The booming siren covered the sound of his rapid footsteps fading down the corridor. This was my only chance. I scrambled out from under the mahogany desk, my stiff muscles screaming in protest. I quickly saved the audio recording and shoved the phone deep into my pocket alongside the master key. I sprinted toward the open doorway, slipping out into the flashing corridor. Trey dropped down silently from a removed ceiling panel just a few feet away, landing in a perfect tactical crouch. He did not speak. He locked eyes with me, saw my fierce determination, and took off running toward the freight elevator. I followed closely, pushing my legs as fast as they could possibly carry me. The siren wailed relentlessly, masking our frantic footsteps. We rounded the final corner and threw ourselves into the open metal elevator. Trey slammed his cloned badge against the reader, hitting the basement button. The heavy doors slid shut, sealing us inside just as my watch clicked to 12:10. The cameras were back online, but we were already descending, having secured the destruction of my husband's toxic empire. I leaned my head back against the cool steel wall of the descending carriage, trying to regulate my jagged breathing. Trey gave me a sharp, approving nod, tapping his watch face twice. We had won the hardest battle tonight. Now it was time to regroup with my father, decode the stolen files, and meticulously prepare the ultimate devastating trap for Julian and his arrogant family to finally step blindly into. The heavy freight elevator doors opened into the subterranean loading dock. Trey and I sprinted toward the medical waste disposal van, throwing off our chemical-smelling coveralls and jumping inside. Trey hit the gas, driving us out of the hospital parking cavern and disappearing into the dark city streets, just as the security cameras booted back online. We drove in complete silence, the adrenaline slowly bleeding out of my veins, leaving me physically exhausted, but mentally sharper than I had ever been in my entire life. We navigated back to the hidden underground maintenance depot where my father was pacing the concrete floor. Layla was still sound asleep, wrapped tightly in a tactical blanket, completely unaware that her mother had just pulled off a high-stakes heist to save her future. I walked straight over to the metal desk, pulling the heavy matte black hardware token from my jacket pocket. I slammed the level 2 master key down onto the metal surface next to my father's rugged laptop. I also placed my mobile phone right beside it. I got the key, I said, my voice raspy. And I got something else. A direct audio recording of Preston admitting to the entire multi-million-dollar fraud ring. He was on the phone with the cartel while I was hiding under his desk. Elias looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of profound relief and fierce pride. "You did it, Nia," he breathed, grabbing the hardware token. "Now let us blow their entire operation wide open." My father plugged the master key into the designated port on his terminal. The rotating cryptographic numbers on the token synced perfectly with the decryption software he had built. A bright green progress bar flashed across the center monitor. The secondary layer of the cloned hard drive was instantly unlocked, tearing down the digital fortress Julian had spent years constructing. The screens flooded with a massive avalanche of irrefutable, unassailable evidence. We stared at the monitors as the absolute depth of their depravity was laid bare. There were thousands of fraudulent Medicare invoices bearing Preston's direct administrative digital signature. There were detailed offshore bank routing numbers tying the stolen funds directly to the cartel accounts opened under Layla's social security number. But the most damning evidence was a hidden folder containing months of encrypted email correspondence between Julian and Preston. Trey read the emails aloud, his voice dripping with pure disgust. Julian explicitly outlined his strategy to funnel the dirty money through my boutique public relations agency. He attached forged authorization forms bearing my digital signature. In one email, Julian wrote that if the federal authorities ever audited the hospital, they would find a perfectly clean administrative record, because all the suspicious financial anomalies would lead straight back to my business accounts. He had meticulously engineered a paper trail to frame me as the sole mastermind of a massive federal crime. He was fully prepared to let me rot in a federal penitentiary for the rest of my life. I picked up my mobile phone and played the audio recording I captured in Preston's office. The arrogant, booming voice of my wealthy brother-in-law echoed through the damp underground depot. We listened to Preston explicitly promise the cartel that Julian was a disposable asset, that my husband would take the fall, and that I was going to prison while their money was washed clean. The sheer callousness of his words sent a fresh wave of cold fury rushing through my veins. They were turning on each other, completely driven by greed and cowardice. "We have everything we need," Trey said, gripping the edge of the metal desk. "We have the motive, the method, and the confession. Let us take this straight to the Atlanta Police Department right now." Elias violently shook his head, pulling a heavy encrypted satellite phone from his tactical supply crate. "Absolutely not," my father commanded. "Preston holds massive influence over local law enforcement and city judges. You heard him on the recording. He bragged about having politicians eating out of his hand. If we hand this evidence over to a local precinct, it will mysteriously disappear into an evidence locker and Nia will be arrested on the spot for kidnapping. We cannot trust anyone inside the city." Elias dialed a long, complex sequence of numbers into the satellite phone. "We are bypassing the local corruption entirely," Elias explained, holding the receiver to his ear. "When I was the federal cybersecurity director, I worked closely with a senior investigator in the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. His name is Agent Sterling. He is completely untouchable, unbribable, and he owes me his career." The line connected and my father spoke in rapid, clipped sentences. He explained the scale of the Medicare fraud, the cartel involvement, and the premeditated conspiracy to frame an innocent woman. Elias initiated a secure file transfer, beaming a compressed packet of the decrypted ledgers and the audio recording directly to Sterling's classified federal terminal. We waited in tense silence for 10 agonizing minutes while the FBI agent reviewed the explosive evidence. Finally, Sterling's voice came through the speakerphone, crisp and highly authoritative. "Elias, this data is absolute gold," Sterling announced. "You have handed me a $15 million federal conspiracy on a silver platter, I am mobilizing a tactical strike team immediately, but we have a significant jurisdictional problem. In order to bring down this entire network under the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, we need to catch them red-handed. If we arrest Julian now, Preston will claim ignorance and hire a fleet of expensive elite defense attorneys. If we go after Preston, he will throw Julian under the bus and flee the country with the cartel funds. To make the RICO charges stick and seize all their assets permanently, I need all the key conspirators gathered in one room actively engaging in the conspiracy. The federal agent paused, letting the weight of his words settle over us. I need a trap, Elias. I need you to lure Julian Preston and their elite enablers into a localized, controlled environment where they believe they have won. Once they take the bait, my strike team will raid the building and arrest them all simultaneously. I stared at the glowing monitors, looking at the fraudulent documents bearing my stolen signature. I thought about the massive public smear campaign Julian was currently running on national television, portraying me as a deranged, violent mother. They believed they held all the power. They believed I was a frightened, desperate woman backed into a corner with absolutely nowhere left to turn. I knew exactly how to use their arrogance against them. I will give you your trap, Agent Sterling, I said, leaning closer to the speakerphone, my voice ringing with absolute cold conviction. I know exactly how to get Julian and Preston into the same room. I will give them exactly what they want. I will give them the perfect victim. I looked at my father and my brother, a fierce fire burning in my chest. We are going to play their game, I declared. We are going to let them think they have completely destroyed me. I will set the stage for their final victory celebration, and when they are blinded by their own elite arrogance, we will drop the federal hammer on their heads. The trap is officially set. The digital clock on my father's encrypted terminal glowed bright red in the dim underground depot. It was time to execute the most critical performance of my entire life. I reached across the metal desk and picked up my disposable burner phone. I took a deep, long breath, closing my eyes and forcing myself to channel every ounce of exhaustion, fear, and desperation I had experienced over the last 24 hours. I needed to sound completely broken. I needed Julian to believe that his psychological warfare had utterly crushed my spirit and driven me straight into the ground. Trey and Elias watched me in tense silence. I gave them a quick nod and dialed Julian's personal cell phone number. I put the device on speakerphone so Agent Sterling could monitor the call from his federal office. The line rang twice before Julian answered. His voice was sharp, defensive, and laced with an arrogant edge. "Hello," Julian snapped. I did not answer immediately. Instead, I let out a ragged, wet sob. I forced my breathing to become shallow and erratic, mimicking a severe panic attack. "Julian," I whimpered, my voice cracking perfectly. "Please, Julian, do not hang up. Please talk to me." "Nia," he demanded, the aggressive tone instantly shifting into a calculating, predatory sneer. "Where are you? Where is my daughter? Where is my—" I let out another loud, agonizing sob, burying my face in my free hand to muffle the sound. "I am so tired, Julian," I cried, letting my voice tremble violently. "I am so incredibly tired, and I am so scared. You were right. You were right about everything. I think I'm losing my mind. I do not know what is real anymore. The police are everywhere, and I saw you on the news. Please, Julian, you have to make them stop. I cannot go to a federal prison. I cannot lose my baby girl. Please do not let Preston take my parental rights away from me. I will do anything you want." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute gold. I could practically hear the enormous inflated ego swelling inside his chest. He was fully convinced that his relentless media campaign and his elite family connections had successfully broken me. He believed I was a terrified, delusional woman begging for his wealthy protection. "Calm down, Nia," Julian replied, his voice dripping with that sickening fake sympathy he had used on the national news broadcast. "You are having a severe manic episode. You are not thinking clearly. But I can fix this. I can protect you from the police, and I can make sure you do not go to jail. But you have to cooperate with me right now." Do you still have that ugly vintage necklace your father gave you? Yes, I sobbed, forcing a pathetic hiccup into the receiver. I have the necklace, Julian. I am holding it right now. I do not even know why I took it. I just panicked. I will give it back to you. I will give you whatever you want. Just please call the police commissioner and tell them to drop the kidnapping charges. Tell Preston to tear up the conservatorship papers. I will sign whatever documents you need me to sign so we can just be a family again. I cannot be separated from Layla. I just want this nightmare to be over. Julian let out a heavy, dramatic sigh. I am glad you are finally seeing reality, Nia, he said smoothly. Preston has a private psychiatric facility ready for you. We can get you the medical help you so desperately need, and we can make all the legal trouble go away quietly. But I need that necklace returned to me tonight. I will bring it to the house I offered, my voice small and incredibly fragile. I can drive back right now. No, Julian interrupted sharply. The house is completely surrounded by local police and news vans. You cannot come here. Preston and I are currently at the Oakwood Country Club. We are hosting a private gathering with some close family associates in the VIP lounge. Bring the necklace to the club. The Oakwood Country Club was the most exclusive, incredibly restrictive elite society establishment in all of Atlanta. It was exactly where arrogant men like Julian and Preston would go to celebrate their massive, illicit victories. They were sitting in a luxurious private lounge, sipping expensive scotch and toasting to my absolute destruction. It was the perfect centralized location for a federal raid. I cannot go to the country club, Julian, I whimpered, injecting pure panic into my tone. The security guards will recognize me from the television broadcast. They will call the police the second I walk through the front doors. You will be fine. Julian sneered, his impatience bleeding through the fake concern. I will text the front gate security to let you through without any questions. You will come through the private rear entrance directly into the VIP lounge. Leave Layla in the car. You will hand me the necklace. You will sign the medical consent forms Preston drafted, and I will personally ensure the police drop the silver alert. Do not make me wait, Nia. If you are not here in exactly 45 minutes, I am calling the authorities and telling them you threatened to harm our daughter. Do you understand me? I understand, Julian. I cried softly. I am leaving right now. Please, just wait for me. I ended the call and tossed the burner phone onto the metal desk. The pathetic, sobbing demeanor vanished from my face, instantly replaced by a cold, calculating smile. I looked up at my father and my brother. Trey was grinning fiercely, gripping his tactical vest. Agent Sterling Elias said, leaning toward the encrypted satellite phone. Did you get the location? Loud and clear, Elias, the federal agent, replied, his voice crackling with intense authority. The Oakwood Country Club, 5 IP Lounge. I have a specialized tactical strike team staging 3 miles away from the perimeter. We are moving in silently. Nia, you have to play your role perfectly. Walk into that room, hand him the hardware token, and get him to plug it into his laptop. The exact second that device interfaces with his terminal, my team is kicking those doors off the hinges. I zipped up my dark jacket and tucked the Level 2 master key safely into my pocket alongside the audio recording of Preston's confession. I am going to give them the greatest show of their entire elite lives, I stated, my voice hard as steel. They want a broken, desperate woman to grovel at their feet. I will give them exactly what they asked for right before we burn their country club to the ground. Let us go finish this. Trey drove the SUV through Buckhead. I sat staring out the window as mansions gave way to the stone walls of Oakwood Country Club. Elias and Layla were secured at the depot. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I needed to look like a woman who had spent 24 hours running for her life, losing her mind and giving up. I rubbed my eyes, smudging my mascara into dark shadows. I pulled my hair out, letting it fall into a tangled knot. I tore the bottom hem of my canvas jacket, giving myself the appearance of someone crawling through dirt. We approached the wrought iron gates. A private security guard stepped out of the booth. Trey kept his head turned away as I leaned across the center console, making my face visible in the security light. The guard took one look at my disheveled state and curled his lip in disgust. He did not ask for identification. Julian had given precise instructions. The guard pressed a button and the gates swung inward. Trey drove to the secluded rear entrance, parking in the shadows near the delivery bay. He gave me a resolute nod. I grabbed the door handle and stepped out, leaving the vehicle behind. I walked alone toward the heavy glass doors, pushing them open with trembling hands. The transition from the cold delivery bay to the interior of the club was jarring. The air smelled of expensive floral arrangements and high-end perfume. The floors were polished white marble, reflecting the warm glow of crystal chandeliers. I kept my shoulders slumped forward, clutching my arms tightly across my chest, adopting a frantic, nervous shuffle. I had to pass through the edge of the main ballroom to reach the private VIP corridor. The room was packed with elite society members. The moment I stepped onto the plush carpet, the elegant conversations around me began to die down. Dozens of wealthy patrons turned to look at me. I could feel their eyes raking over my smudged makeup, my torn jacket, and my chaotic hair. Women in sparkling designer gowns whispered behind manicured hands. Men in tailored tuxedos shook their heads, looking at me like I was a feral animal wandering into their sanctuary. They had all seen the national news broadcast. They genuinely believed I was the psychotic woman who stole from her husband and kidnapped her daughter. I played the part flawlessly, darting my eyes nervously, making sure I looked utterly broken. A stern manager in a crisp black suit intercepted me before I could take another step. "You are expected in the executive lounge," he said, his voice dripping with icy contempt. He did not wait for my reply. He turned sharply and marched down a long corridor flanked by heavy velvet curtains. I followed him, maintaining my pathetic, shuffling walk. We reached the end of the hallway, stopping in front of massive mahogany doors guarded by 2 security contractors. The manager opened the door wordlessly, gesturing for me to step inside. I crossed the threshold, and the heavy wooden doors clicked firmly shut behind me, sealing me inside the lion's den. The VIP lounge was a portrait of arrogant elite victory. The room was rich with dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and the heavy scent of imported cigars. Sitting directly in the center of the room on a plush leather sofa was Julian. He was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, looking perfectly groomed and completely relaxed. Sitting in the armchair to his right was his sister, holding a delicate crystal flute of champagne. She glared at me with pure hatred, her lips curled into a victorious sneer. But it was Preston who commanded the room. The hospital administrator stood by the marble fireplace, swirling an amber liquid in a heavy crystal glass, looking down at me with the supreme arrogance of a king surveying a conquered peasant. "Look what the cat dragged out of the gutter," Julian's sister spat, taking a slow sip of her champagne. "You look absolutely pathetic, Nia. I hope you realize you have ruined your life permanently." I kept my eyes fixed on the floor, forcing my shoulders to shake uncontrollably. I let out a pathetic whimper, clutching my arms tighter around my chest. Julian stood up, buttoning his suit jacket with a smooth, practiced motion. He walked toward me, looking at my disheveled state with pure amusement. "I told you that you were not smart enough to play this game," Julian said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You tried to run, but you have nowhere to go. You do not have the money, connections, or intelligence to beat us." Preston set his glass down on the marble fireplace mantel with a sharp clack. He walked over to a heavy oak side table and picked up a thick manila folder. He marched toward me, stopping just 2 feet away. He pulled a stack of legal documents from the folder and tossed them aggressively onto the glass coffee table in front of me. The papers scattered across the smooth surface. "Those are your divorce papers and a full, irrevocable custody surrender form," Preston announced, his deep voice echoing in the private lounge. "You are going to sign away every single right you have to Layla right now. You are going to admit in writing that you suffered a severe psychotic break and require immediate long-term institutionalization." I let out another manufactured sob, dropping to my knees right in front of the glass table. "Please," I cried softly, forcing tears down my cheeks. "Please, just let me see my baby. I cannot do this anymore. I am so tired." Preston laughed, a cold, dark sound that chilled the room. "You do not get to make demands anymore," Preston stated, stepping closer and looking down at me like an insect. Sign these papers, give us the necklace, and I will make sure you go to a nice psychiatric facility instead of a federal prison. I stared at the glass table shaking with manufactured sobs. The heavy silence in the VIP lounge pressed down on me like a physical weight. Preston stood towering over me. Julian crossed his arms, watching me struggle to breathe through fake tears. I reached a trembling hand into the torn pocket of my jacket. My fingertips brushed against the level 2 master key in my burner phone. I wrapped my fingers around the brass locket. It was the trash Julian mocked at my birthday dinner. I pulled it out slowly, holding it suspended over the table. Julian's sister let out a cruel bark of laughter. "Look at her, Julian," she mocked, swirling the champagne in her crystal flute. "She finally understands her proper place. She is nothing without our family." I kept my eyes locked on the glass surface below me, forcing myself to embody the defeated victim. "Please, Julian," I whispered, my voice hoarse and broken. "Please, just take the necklace and let me see Layla. I will sign the divorce papers. I will sign the custody surrender forms. I will go to the psychiatric facility. Just do not let the judge put me in a federal prison cell." I placed the brass locket gently onto the glass table. The heavy metal made a hollow clinking sound that echoed loudly through the quiet private room. Before my fingers released the chain, Julian lunged forward. He forcefully snatched the locket from the glass table with the speed of a striking snake. A victorious sneer twisted his handsome face, transforming him into the arrogant monster he truly was. "You really are pathetic, Nia," Julian spat, holding the necklace up to the warm light of the crystal chandelier. "You actually thought you could outsmart me with this cheap piece of garbage. You thought your washed-up father could build a digital trap that I would not find and dismantle. You played a dangerous game out of your league, and now you have lost everything." Preston chuckled a dark, humorless sound as he adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit jacket. "Let us get this over with." "Julian," Preston commanded, turning his back to me and walking toward the lavish mahogany wet bar. A sleek silver laptop sat open and glowing on the marble counter already connected to the secure local network of the country club. "Wipe the encrypted drives right now," Preston ordered, his tone carrying absolute authority. "Erase every trace of the cloned data on that key. Burn the files down to digital ash. Once the server registers the permanent deletion of the evidence, I will call the police commissioner and tell him we finally located our missing mental patient. We will have her locked in a padded room before midnight." Julian strode confidently toward the mahogany wet bar, his eyes gleaming with malicious triumph. He popped open the hidden clasp of the vintage locket, revealing the military-grade biometric FIDO key concealed inside the brass casing. He held it up, admiring the device that had caused them so much panic. "You are going to enjoy the psychiatric ward," Nia Julian taunted without looking back at me. "They have excellent sedation protocols. You will not have to worry about running your public relations agency or paying the mortgage ever again. You can just sleep the years away while I raise my daughter the right way." I remained kneeling on the floor, keeping my head lowered, but a fierce fire ignited deep within my chest. I watched Julian from beneath my tangled hair. He did not know Elias and I had spent hours in the underground maintenance depot preparing for this exact moment. He did not know my father had meticulously rewritten the internal source code of the hardware token before giving it back to me. When Elias decrypted the secondary layer of the cartel ledgers using the stolen master key, he altered the core functionality of the brass locket. Julian fully believed plugging the device into his laptop would initiate a localized wipe command, destroying the stolen data permanently. He believed he was erasing the only evidence that could send him and his brother-in-law to a federal penitentiary for massive Medicare fraud. He thought he was closing the loop and securing his elite future forever. He did not know he was holding a devastating digital Trojan horse directly in his hands. Julian slid the FIDO key smoothly into the USB port of his laptop. A soft chime echoed, acknowledging the connected hardware. Julian rapidly typed his administrative password into the terminal, his fingers flying across the keys with eager anticipation. He hit enter to execute the deletion protocol. He stood back, crossing his arms and grinning proudly at the bright screen. But the files did not delete. Instead of the prompt confirming the removal of the encrypted data, a stark pitch-black command terminal suddenly popped up, overriding his entire operating system. Lines of aggressive bright red code began cascading down the monitor at a blinding speed. Julian's smug, victorious smile instantly vanished, replaced by a look of profound confusion. "Wait," Julian muttered, leaning closer to the screen and furiously tapping the escape key. "What is happening? This is not the deletion sequence. The computer is completely locking me out." Preston spun around his drink, splashing over the rim of his crystal glass. "What do you mean it is locking you out?" Preston demanded, his voice rising in sudden panic. "Pull the drive out, Julian. Pull it out right now." Julian yanked the brass locket out of the USB port, but it was far too late. The malicious payload command had already been successfully executed. The red code on the screen froze, and a single ominous loading bar appeared in the center of the monitor. The digital trap my father built had seamlessly bypassed the country club security firewalls and was rapidly hijacking the entire audiovisual network of the building. The ultimate devastation of their elite empire was officially counting down to zero. The loading bar on Julian's laptop hit 100%. A piercing electronic feedback squeal erupted from the hidden surround sound speakers built into the ceiling of the VIP lounge. Julian covered his ears, stepping back from the mahogany wet bar. The massive 85-inch smart television mounted above the marble fireplace suddenly powered on by itself. The screen flared with a blinding white light, casting harsh shadows across the dark wood paneling of the room. Preston's sister shrieked, dropping her crystal champagne flute. It shattered against the floor, sending shards of glass flying across the expensive carpet. "Turn it off!" Preston roared, marching toward the television and clawing frantically at the power cord hidden behind the mounting bracket. He yanked the wire violently from the wall, but the screen did not go dark. My father had anticipated their panic. The display was hardwired into the country club's emergency backup power grid, overriding all localized control systems. The white noise abruptly cut out, replaced by a sharp, crystal-clear audio recording. It was the exact conversation I had captured while hiding under Preston's massive desk just hours ago. Preston's booming voice echoed from every single speaker in the room. "I am the chief administrator of this medical network. I have politicians and judges eating out of my hand. You are getting your $15 million plus the interest penalty." Julian froze completely. His hands dropped slowly to his sides. He stared at the television screen, his mouth hanging open in pure disbelief. He recognized the tone. He recognized the arrogant inflection. It was undeniably his wealthy brother-in-law negotiating with the cartel creditors. The audio continued blasting at maximum volume, impossible to ignore. "I do not care what Julian promised you." Preston's recorded voice sneered, dripping with absolute venom. "Julian is a disposable asset. He served his purpose by manipulating the billing software and bringing his naive wife into the fold. But he is a liability now. Do not worry about him. Julian is taking the fall, his wife is going to prison, and your money will be washed clean by tomorrow morning." Julian's face drained of all color. The smug, victorious expression he had worn just moments ago completely evaporated, replaced by a look of profound, absolute horror. He slowly turned his head to look at Preston. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the chest. He had spent years desperately kissing the ground Preston walked on, catering to his elite family, betraying his own wife, and weaponizing his innocent daughter's identity just to earn a seat at their wealthy table. And in return, Preston had casually signed his death warrant without a second of hesitation. Julian realized he was never truly part of their elite circle. He was just a convenient scapegoat, a sacrificial lamb waiting to be slaughtered to protect Preston's pristine public reputation. "You were going to let me go to federal prison," Julian whispered, his voice trembling violently. "You were going to hand me over to the cartel." "Shut up!" Julian, Preston barked, his eyes darting frantically around the room like a trapped animal. He abandoned the television and rushed back to the laptop, slamming his fists against the keyboard, trying desperately to kill the broadcast. But the audio was not just contained to our private lounge. Through the heavy mahogany doors, I could hear the exact same recording echoing loudly through the main ballroom outside. The string quartet had abruptly stopped playing. The low murmur of wealthy conversations had completely vanished, replaced by a collective gasp of pure shock. The visual payload executed its second phase. The smart television above the fireplace shifted from a black screen to a rolling display of highly classified financial documents. The $15 million Medicare fraud ledgers flashed in bright, high definition. The offshore bank account routing numbers appeared next side by side with Preston's direct administrative signature and Julian's billing authorization codes. Every single piece of evidence proving their massive money laundering operation was currently being broadcast to every monitor, projector, and digital display across the entire Oakwood Country Club. Outside in the grand ballroom, hundreds of Atlanta's most elite society members, politicians, local judges, and wealthy socialites were standing frozen in their designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. They were staring up at the massive projection screens normally reserved for charity gala presentations. They were watching the untouchable hospital administrator and his polished brother-in-law be exposed as ruthless criminal frauds. The prestigious, flawless facade of their powerful family was being violently torn to shreds in front of the exact people they spent their entire lives trying to impress. Julian's sister fell to her knees, her hands clutching her head. She let out a guttural scream of absolute denial, refusing to look at the financial documents proving her family was bankrupt and entirely funded by stolen federal money. "Our reputation," she sobbed hysterically, swaying back and forth on the carpet. "Our entire legacy is ruined." I did not stay on the floor. I slowly stood up, brushing the dirt off the torn knees of my canvas jacket. I pushed my tangled hair out of my face and stood tall, dropping the pathetic, trembling victim act entirely. The power dynamic in the VIP lounge had completely inverted. I was no longer the frightened working-class woman begging for mercy. I was the architect of their absolute destruction. Julian stumbled backward away from Preston, his eyes wide and frantic. He looked at me, his chest heaving with panicked breaths. "Nia," he stammered, taking a shaky step in my direction. "Nia, you have to believe me. I did not know he was going to sell me out to the cartel. He forced me to do the billing manipulation. He made me use your business." I looked at him, feeling absolute cold indifference. "You used our innocent daughter to open those offshore accounts." I stated, my voice ringing with steady conviction over the audio broadcast playing in the background. "You forged my signature on federal documents to create a scapegoat. Do not stand there and pretend you were unwilling. You made your choices, Julian, and now you will pay the ultimate price for them." Julian reached out his hands, trembling wildly as reality shattered his delusion. "Nia, please," he begged, his voice cracking. "We can fix this together. I will testify against him. I will give them everything they need to lock Preston away forever. Just tell them I was coerced into doing this. Tell them I was trying to protect our family. You have to save me." Before I could respond, the heavy mahogany doors of the VIP lounge blew open with explosive force. Dozens of heavily armed federal agents stormed into the private room. They wore dark tactical gear with FBI emblazoned across their ballistic vests in bright yellow letters. Agent Sterling led the breach, his service weapon drawn, and his eyes locked directly onto the two men standing in the center of the room. The overwhelming presence of the strike team instantly sucked all the oxygen out of the luxurious space. "Federal agents, nobody move!" Sterling roared, his commanding voice cutting through the blaring audio broadcast that continued to loop from the ceiling speakers. "Get your hands where I can see them right now. Do not make a sudden movement." Preston panicked instantly. His elite arrogance evaporated in the face of federal authority. He lunged toward the private service exit at the back of the lounge, desperately trying to save his own skin, but he did not make it 2 steps. 3 tactical agents intercepted him immediately, moving with flawless precision. They grabbed Preston by his tailored suit jacket and slammed him brutally against the dark wood-paneled wall. The heavy impact knocked the breath out of his lungs. A pair of steel handcuffs clicked sharply around his wrists, securing his hands behind his back. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Preston shouted, struggling violently against the agents pinning him. "I know the mayor. I know the governor. You cannot do this to me. I will have your badges for this absolute outrage." You need a lot more than the mayor to get out of a $15 million federal racketeering charge, Sterling replied coldly, holstering his weapon. Preston, you are under arrest for conspiracy wire fraud, money laundering, and violations of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you start using it immediately. Julian did not try to run. He realized there was absolutely no escape from the digital trap we had meticulously set. He dropped heavily to his knees right in front of me. The polished medical billing director was reduced to a weeping, pathetic mess on the expensive carpet. He reached out and grabbed the torn hem of my canvas jacket, sobbing hysterically like a terrified child. "Nia, please," Julian begged, hot tears streaming down his face. "I am so incredibly sorry. Preston forced me into this nightmare. He threatened me. He told me he would ruin my career if I did not help him move the illicit money. I never wanted to hurt you or Layla. You know me, Nia. You know I truly love you. Please tell the federal agents I am innocent. Please do not let them take me away from our beautiful daughter. I will do anything you want." I looked down at the man I had shared my life with for 7 long years. I searched my heart for a single shred of empathy, but I felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no sadness, no lingering affection. The faux fragility I used to trap him into this room was entirely gone. I was standing tall, my spine straight, and my vision crystal clear. "You do not get to mention Layla's name ever again," I stated, my voice radiating pure cold indifference. "You stopped being a father the exact second you used her innocent identity to open offshore cartel accounts. You stopped being a husband the moment you planned to send me to a federal prison to save your cowardly skin. You built a toxic cage for me, Julian. Now you get to rot inside it for the rest of your miserable life." I reached down and forcefully ripped the fabric of my jacket out of his grip. "Love does not look like a multi-million-dollar frame job, Julian," I said, staring down at him with absolute finality. "Enjoy your new elite society behind cold federal bars." I took a deliberate step forward, stepping right over his kneeling, trembling body. I did not look back. 2 federal agents immediately grabbed Julian by his shoulders, hauling him roughly to his feet. He screamed my name, sobbing uncontrollably as they slapped the heavy steel cuffs onto his wrists. He thrashed against their firm grip, begging for mercy from the woman he had spent months trying to destroy. The agents dragged him backward out of the VIP lounge, his desperate pleas echoing loudly over the sound of the federal raid. Agent Sterling walked over to me, a look of deep professional respect shining in his eyes. He reached into his tactical vest pocket and handed me my burner phone. "Your father is waiting for you outside the perimeter," Sterling said quietly. "We have everything we need right here." "You did incredibly well, Nia. The cartel accounts are frozen, and the arrest warrants are being executed as we speak. Your name is completely clear." I took the phone and nodded, a sense of relief washing over my tired body. "Thank you, Agent Sterling," I replied, turning toward the exit. I walked out of the VIP lounge, stepping back into the grand ballroom. The massive projection screens were still flashing proof of their crimes. The wealthy elite guests parted as I walked proudly through their ranks, leaving their burning empire far behind me forever. 6 months have passed since I walked out of those heavy mahogany doors. The crisp autumn air now feels entirely different from the suffocating atmosphere of my previous life. The federal government moved with absolute ruthless efficiency following the dramatic arrests. Under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the authorities systematically dismantled every single piece of the fraudulent network Preston and Julian had spent years carefully constructing. The fallout was spectacular and entirely public, because they utilized stolen federal Medicare funds and engaged in international money laundering with a known cartel syndicate. The Federal Bureau of Investigation possessed the full legal authority to seize all of their assets. And I mean absolutely all of them without any hesitation. Preston lost his sprawling multi-million-dollar estate located in the wealthiest district of Buckhead. His luxury vehicles, his private hospital administration accounts, and his offshore investments were immediately frozen and confiscated by the federal government. The prestigious hospital board fired him the very next morning, stripping him of his medical license and his pristine public reputation. Julian faced the exact same devastating fate. The federal prosecutors offered him absolutely no leniency or plea deals. My former husband is currently sitting in a maximum security federal penitentiary awaiting trial, facing a mandatory minimum sentence of 30 years, without the possibility of early parole. He spends his long days in a tiny concrete cell, entirely stripped of the elite tailored suits and the wealthy arrogance he once wore like a second skin. Their public disgrace was poetry. The elite family members who had spent years looking down their noses at my working-class background were abruptly forced into total bankruptcy. Julian's sister, the woman who had viciously berated me over the phone and demanded I be locked in a psychiatric ward, was formally evicted from her luxury condominium. The federal authorities seized her trust fund because it was partially financed by Preston's stolen money. She was last seen moving her designer luggage into a cheap roadside motel, completely shunned by the wealthy society peers she had worshipped her entire life. She had spent her entire existence judging people like me based on our bank accounts, and now she was forced to experience the bitter reality of absolute poverty. They were all exposed as common thieves hiding behind country club memberships and generational wealth. Their powerful family name is now entirely synonymous with corporate greed and federal criminal fraud. As for me, the trajectory of my life took a magnificent upward turn. Within 2 weeks of the federal raid, Agent Sterling ensured that my seized business accounts were entirely cleared of all suspicion. The $450,000 Julian stole was returned to my boutique public relations agency, down to the very last cent. More importantly, Layla's college fund was completely restored, and the fraudulent offshore cartel accounts opened in her name were permanently scrubbed from her pristine record. My daughter is safe and her bright future is entirely secure from their toxic grasp. My public relations agency did not just survive the massive scandal. We absolutely thrived. The national media coverage of my survival story transformed me into a celebrated symbol of fierce resilience. Corporate clients flocked to my firm, respecting the strategic determination I had shown in dismantling a criminal syndicate. We rapidly expanded our daily operations, hiring 10 new employees and securing major national contracts. The business that Julian and Preston had mocked as a grassroots hobby became a formidable powerhouse in the Atlanta corporate sphere. I used my hard-earned financial success to purchase a beautiful new home far away from the toxic elite neighborhoods of my dark past. Right now, I am sitting on the wraparound porch of our new house, watching the golden autumn leaves fall across the expansive front yard. The crisp air smells like fresh pine and complete freedom. Layla is running across the green grass, laughing loudly as she chases our new golden retriever puppy. She is happy, healthy, and entirely untouched by the storm that almost consumed us. Trey is standing by the barbecue grill, flipping burgers and arguing good-naturedly with my father about the proper way to season the meat. My brother looks relaxed, the hyper-vigilant military tension finally gone from his broad shoulders. Elias is sitting in the rocking chair next to me, sipping a glass of sweet iced tea. My father looks incredibly proud. He does not have to worry about protecting us from monsters hiding in our own home anymore. I reach into the pocket of my comfortable cardigan and pull out the vintage brass locket. The metal is slightly tarnished and it looks like a cheap piece of antique junk. I hold it up, letting the afternoon sunlight catch the edges of the brass casing. I run my thumb over the smooth surface, marveling at the incredible sequence of events this tiny object initiated. Julian had smirked at this necklace, calling it a piece of trash, and promising to replace it with a real diamond to hide my working-class roots. He was so blinded by his elite arrogance that he could not see the sheer brilliance hidden beneath a humble exterior. This ugly vintage locket held the military-grade biometric key that unlocked my absolute salvation. It was the greatest gift I have ever received in my entire life. It did not just save my business and my freedom. It saved my beautiful daughter. I closed my hand tightly around the brass locket, feeling its solid, reassuring weight against my palm. I looked directly into the camera, sharing the ultimate lesson I learned from this terrifying journey. Has your intuition ever told you that the person sleeping next to you was hiding a dangerous secret? How did you protect yourself? Tell me your story in the comments below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more stories. Remember, sometimes the ugliest gifts are the only things that can save your life. The profound lesson of Nia's journey is that true value never lies in elite appearances. Julian and his wealthy family hid their monstrous greed behind a pristine facade, looking down on her working-class roots. However, it was her father's seemingly ugly vintage locket that held the power to dismantle their entire criminal empire. Nia learned that genuine strength comes from trusting your intuition, refusing to be gaslit, and relying on authentic love over toxic, status-driven relationships. Never underestimate your resilience. Please share your own survival story in the comments below, and always remember to like and subscribe for more content.